Welcome back, everyone. I'm Halima Sharif, and I'm your host for Anything and Everything, an internet-based show which acknowledges humanity at its core and recognizes that everyone has a story. In June 2020, I decided to create something meaningful and entertaining to help ease the sadness and frustration caused by the pandemic. And in less than a year, we have produced over 20 episodes within the following categories: the New Orleans Music Legends, Women of Color Catalysts, Women of Color Catalysts and Their Allies, the Artist Circle, the Brotherhood Circle. I have interviewed such notables as former executive writer, producer for The Martin Lawrence Show, Kenny Buford, New Orleans jazz legend Edward Kid Jordan, Jermaine Bazo, and Roger Dickerson, actor, comedian, and Saturday Night Live's first Black actor, Garrett Morris, famed comedian, actress Lunel, First Lady Jill Biden's Chief of Staff and former U.S. Ambassador of Uruguay, Julissa Reynosa, Kimba Hendricks, Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the House of Representatives, and Suba Berry, Ceramount's President and CEO. The show can be found on YouTube as well as in podcast form on major platforms. For more information, visit www.anythingandeverythingmedia.com. Well, today, this is our 23rd episode, and we will celebrate 1 year of doing this show on June 25th. So I have to say I am thrilled today to welcome a brother who I've known for several years. I think I met him back in 2006. He's a wonderful guest to our Artist Circle platform, entertainment and media industry veteran, Mr. Kevin Harewood. Welcome, Kevin. It's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. And I didn't realize it was a year, almost a year to the day. That's wonderful, and congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm still trying to figure out what happened, but I'm grateful. Grateful. You know, Kev, I was trying to remember how we actually met, and I think it helped me remember this. I think it was when I was working at the American Lung Association in New York, and my dear friend, late friend Karen Glover, introduced us by way of someone else, because I think I was looking for a videographer, photographer. Right. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I remember schlepping over to Wall Street, which is a side of town that I try not to go to too much, with myself, my cousin Steve, who produces a lot of things with me, carrying camera equipment on the subway from Brooklyn, walking down Wall Street and coming over to the building where the American Lung Association was at. Karen was a wonderful woman, and she introduced us via a mutual friend, Margot Jordan,
yes.
Who is a prominent still photographer around town. And a lot of times we would do things, together, or, recommend each other for different projects. If it was stills, I would recommend her. If it was videos, she would recommend me, and so on and so forth.
Well, listen, I'm grateful for the connection. You know, it's interesting because I later discovered that you had more than videography and photography skills. So on that note, I'm going to introduce everyone to exactly who is the Mr. Kevin Harewood.
Okay, so
I'm going to read your bio first.
Okay.
Okay. Brooklyn, New York native Kevin Harewood is an entertainment and media industry veteran of over 30 years. Kevin's career began as a New York market college promotion representative of A&M Records while he was still a student at Brooklyn College at the City University of New York. He then moved into sales and marketing over at A&M and later to the marketing department of Arista Records. Kevin later moved into the management aspect of the music industry with the influential Hush Productions Management Company. There as VP GM, Kevin was involved in helping the company grow from its music management base to a place where it had holdings as a music publishing company, a record company, and a film company. Its bush-burning publishing arm in the top 5 of urban music publishers during its tenure. Orpheus Records and Orpheus Pictures worked on projects that featured talent such as Freddie Jackson, Najee, Alex Bunyan, Kadeem Hardison, Bill Nunn, Samuel Jackson, James Bond III, and several others. Kevin left Hush Productions to head up the Black Entertainment Department at William Morris Agency in Beverly Hills. There he worked with talent such as Chris Rock, Bill Nunn, Jonathan Butler, Vanessa Williams, Ice-T, Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince, Randy Crawford, and many others. Other career highlights include a stint as VP General Manager of Grindstone Entertainment, Correct Records. Kevin founded Eclectic Entertainment in 2001. Via Eclectic, am I saying that right? It's Eclectic. I remember a long time ago you were correcting me. He continues to work on key cutting-edge music and independent film projects. In 2004, he produced and directed, along with Stephen Booth, the basketball documentary 25 Strong, a film about basketball, a film about life. In early 2007, his book, Make Your Move, A Guide to Releasing Music Independently, was released. Kevin is also a contributor to a book, Family Affair, What It Means to Be African American Today, edited by Gil Robertson IV on Agatha Press, and 44 on the 44th, 44 essays on the election of President Barack Obama on Third World Press, edited by Lila Hooper, Sonia Sanchez, and Michael Simanga. As I mentioned earlier, you have more than photography skills, Kevin. You have had and continue to have a busy journey in the industry space. So on that note, I'd like you to take us through your journey to music, film, community, and cultural outreach. Let's start with your upbringing and what may have served as a catalyst to where you are today.
Okay, so I grew up in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, New York. Formative times, late 60s, early to mid 70s, as a youth. And music and arts were a integral part of both sides of my family. My mother's side of family is from a small town in Virginia called Gloucester, Gloucester County, Virginia. And my dad's family is from Barbados. So being with that mixture and being in Brooklyn at that time, I heard every bit of music from funk to R&B to calypso, to reggae, to African. People became aware of Fela in America.
Yeah.
In the 2000s when the musical came around, but in Brooklyn, we knew Fela from the streets of Brooklyn. There was a record shop on Nostrand Avenue called the African Record Center that sold all this African music. So we knew Fela from back then, with somebody that we were listening to. It get imported over here on a label called Editions Makossa. So, and then in Brooklyn, you had at the neighborhood junior high school, you had a gentleman whose name was his original government name was Leslie Campbell, but he became known to the world as G2 Wauzi, and he started a cultural center called the East at Brooklyn, and people now know the every year on the 4th of July weekend, International African Arts Festival. Well, the International Arts Festival originally started right in the street on Claver Place between Fulton and Jefferson as a fundraiser for when the East started an independent African-centric school, the Uhuru Sasa School, Freedom Now School, so that even if you didn't, like I was educated in the New York City public school system, but these things had some sort of residue over you, or you picked up some of it, even if you didn't, go to Uhuru Sasa. So, you picked up somewhat, if you were of a particular consciousness, you picked up a certain awareness of arts, culture, and African diasporic arts and culture. And it comes from the neighborhood, it comes from my family. So that my precipice through through my professional career, I've been fortunate to work almost entirely in the things that I loved in my life, which is film, music, television, and a little bit of sports, because I was also an athlete growing up, very much into very much a jock growing up. So, I've been blessed, and it all goes back to the foundation, and what I was raised on, and been blessed to be able to to enjoy doing that.
Man, that's a beautiful foundation. I mean, not too many people can say that, based on your upbringing, and the people, your village that you were surrounded by on a daily basis, and even throughout your development,
Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to probably, connect with people who allowed you to get to that next phase.
Well, it's interesting in that, I'm sitting here thinking, and my dad, was a drummer. And he was the oldest in his family. And then his second brother, he taught how to play drums. And so my dad, played gigs and stuff like that. And then he kind of stopped. I'm the youngest of two. And when I came along, he kind of stopped playing my dad. But my uncle continued on. And my uncle Al played on many, 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 many of the great Blue Note prestige recordings with the likes of Lou Donaldson, Dexter Gordon, Stanley Tarantine,
yes,
Benny Golson, on and on and on and on. So what happened and then my dad's 9 to 5 was in U.S. Customs. He was involved in real estate, but he still, on the side, did a lot of musical things, and literally was promoting a concert the day that he died. I mean, like a couple of days before he died, he was preparing for a concert that he was promoting, that he used to promote this annual jazz concert at his church and collect people coming over, collecting tickets, stuff like that. And then, on Saturday and on Monday, he died. So we would have like family gatherings. And I was like, a little boy, and it'd be like, my uncle always had a pool table in his house. So the men would be around playing pool, and it, may be somebody like, I remember when I was real little, there was this tall guy named Ron, and Ron was there, and they'd always be talking as we do, and they'd be playing pool, and, all of a sudden, after a while, Ron wasn't around anymore, and you're a little boy, and it's like, I went several years, and it's like, I remember Uncle Al had this friend named Ron, and I knew they were all musicians, but I didn't know to what extent, and also being young, jazz was like old folks music at that time. So I grew up from a little thing with my dad and my uncle playing Miles Davis Kind of Blue for me. But at that point, I didn't appreciate what it was. I just knew, I knew that rhythm. They had taught me some basic drum rudiments from that. And then years later, I realized that Ron was Ron Carter. And that the reason why he wasn't around anymore was because Miles Davis had called him. And then the rest is history.
Exactly. I know the story.
So you have, like my uncle played drums on a classic recording by Stanley Tarantine up in Benton's. They do a classic, probably one of Stanley Tarantine's most known pieces. But it's like I didn't know, like, I knew that music from hearing it. I didn't know what the impact of it was, what its place in history was. I didn't know that Minton's was this legendary place that
Mm-hmm.
is ground zero to where bebop started, or bebop grew, so my dad, being Caribbean, like I said, my father's side of the family is Caribbean, and my dad was friends with Irwin Burgie,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote Dale, but he was just Irwin to me. It's like he was like my dad's friend Irwin, who lived a few blocks
You
away.
didn't think anything of it, I know.
And Dale was like a song. It's like, this guy wrote the Bayesian national anthem. It's
That's
like,
amazing.
I didn't think anything like that. It was actually funny when I was a kid. My dad championed and invested in this musical called The Ballad of Bimpshire. Barbados is called.
I can't hear you for some reason. Oh, there you go.
Hear me now? Yeah.
I can hear you now.
Barbados is called BIM. And it's like the play, I think it had like Ruby D and Ozzie Davis, I think were in it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like on Broadway, like this. It didn't last that long. It kind of stiffed, but it's like the connect, like you don't understand those things. It's just like, can I get some new sneakers? Can you take me to the baseball game?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I want to get the new James Brown record. Is when you're, when you're old. When you're that young, you don't realize significance of all those things, but it's an integral part into who I am, and it's been a pretty colorful life, growing up that way.
Hey, I can relate, because when you're young like that, you don't, daddy is daddy, mom is mom, and I can relate to that because of my father. I didn't know who Count Basie was.
Right.
I didn't know who Dizzy Gillespie was. I heard their names. Lionel Hampton.
Right.
He would call the house, and I'll be like, "Daddy Lionel's on the phone, Mr. Lionel." I say Lionel, but and then I remember a time when Quincy Jones had called the house. I was about 12 years old,
right,
and my mother couldn't stand when somebody would call and like, "Daddy, telephone."
Right.
So, don't holler on here. So I literally screamed, "Daddy, somebody named Quincy on the phone."
Right.
I didn't know. I didn't even know who he was at 11, 12 years old. I didn't care.
Right.
And then as I got older, I'm like, I'll be darned. It was just kind of funny. But you learn to appreciate that later on when you get older, and you be like, man, these are some legends. These are some legends that paved the way for you, me, and others to come.
Right.
When I hear a lot of these young musicians using these different beats, you're like, do y'all know where these beats came from?
Right.
Do you know where that originated? That's James Brown, that's Dizzy,
Right.
They don't know that, and that history is so important.
Right. It's funny in that when I was in school, in middle school, high school, I played in the concert band. I played brass. I played trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
I played baritone. And when I did, I really kind of got into jazz myself as in terms of appreciating it when I got to college. And I was fortunate enough to be in the college right when a lot of the electronic funk jazz and jazz fusion stuff started hitting. So I would say for me, in terms of like Herbie Hancock's Headhunters album with Chameleon on it, and Grover Washington's Mr. Magic were like ground zero. And then I went back from there. Like I found out that Herbie Hancock had played with Miles Davis. Well, I knew who Miles Davis was, and Miles Davis was always somebody I appreciated being a trumpet player. But I went back and then got deeper into the music. And then I developed my own aesthetic. So I jazz-wise, was always more into combos than big bands.
Okay.
So, but I became aware of big bands. But one of the prominent big bands of the time was the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis big band that played every Sunday night at the Village Vanguard in New York City. Well, I wasn't into them as much as, let's say, I was into the classic John Coltrane quartet, you know, with McCoy Tyner and Elvin Jones and so on, or the Miles Davis, you know, Cannonball, Jimmy Cobb, you know, yada yada yada, or even, you know, some of the groups that my uncle played in, where it, you know, it might just be Dexter Gordon, Horace Pallon, my uncle, and bass player, but so I wasn't into big bands as much. And I certainly wasn't into, you know, and hopefully people don't take this wrong, but I'm just being real here. I certainly wasn't into the Mel Lewis, the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band, because it was like outside looking in, I didn't know the Jones family.
Right.
Outside looking in, it was like, okay, well, this band is getting a certain amount of play because they have like a white drummer who's also co-leader, who's not as good as, you know, Louis Hayes or, you know, Jimmy Cobb or, you know, my Uncle Al, or this white guy is getting play as a drummer. He ain't that good. And they have this big band that's getting all this attention in the newspapers, stuff like that. I'm not really into them. Well, segue to later, living in LA, one of my dogs is a gentleman named Bruce Thaddeus Jones.
Wow.
Who is Thad Jones' oldest son.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm friend Thad Jones in his first marriage had 2 children, Bruce and Thadia, who brother and sister, who actually Bruce they grew up in New Jersey, but I didn't know them from there. I knew Bruce when I lived in LA. He's involved in the music business from a radio promotion standpoint. I am Thad Jones. Unfortunately, Thad Jones passed away before I knew Bruce. But I'm Thad Jones' granddaughter, who was also born after Thad Jones passed away. I am his granddaughter's godfather.
Look at that lineage.
It's amazing that God is one of the best comedy writers ever. I mean, is the best comedy writer ever done. Because here's literally, I remember like being in college and in my early 20s, and you know, I don't like this Thad Jones. Mel Lewis, big fan. You know, it's like this white guy is like trying to take advantage of this black
full
dude.
circle. You see that?
And I realized that Mr. Jones, who, if he was alive and I would have actually met him, would have been Mr. Jones to me instead of, you know, Thad Jones, and that he's one of the greatest arrangers of all time, to where Jelani probably had to study him at Berkeley, because I have a young man from my church who's at Berkeley now, and he was going out to LA, and I was like, okay, look, Cisco, when you go to LA, here's a number. This is Thad Jones' son's number. He'll look after you, you know, because he was traveling for the first time on his own and going to Los Angeles. He didn't know anybody. I was like, if you need anything, just call him, tell him I gave you the number, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, Thad Jones, it's like we study his music in school.
That's so crazy.
You know, so it's amazing how things go around, and then you look at it that I mean, Elvin I never met. You know, they have the Thad Jones, Elvin Jones, Hank Jones, the brothers. I never met Elvin, but I have on several occasions hung out with Bruce and his uncle Hank before he died. And he's one of the most influential piano players in the history of jazz. And he's the piano player that played piano the night that Marilyn Monroe sang Happy Birthday to John F. Kennedy. Man, so it's that's like
some serious history.
We're like Bruce and I would always be like, Uncle Hank's always smiling. Like, I wonder what happened. Like, what does he know? And like, and even like recently, I mean, Uncle Hank passed away a few years back, but we're like, man, there's so many things we could have asked Uncle Hank
Man.
that we never asked him. Like, did he ever see like John F. Kennedy sneaking into Marilyn Monroe's hotel room or something?
Y'all better go find those diaries.
But it's just amazing. It's just,
Man, these are some wonderful stories. That, and going back to why I decided to do this show, and to create this platform, because I learned so much. And even from you, considering how long we've known each other, you just never know how you're connected to someone,
right,
beyond taking pictures and videos and whatnot. But your journey is just, it's phenomenal, and the people that you've been able to meet, and then people that family.
Right.
So which is a perfect segue, Kev. You mentioned all these wonderful names, and I'm sure back then and even now, who would you say some of your influencers are?
Okay, well, definitely. I mean, obviously, I mentioned my family. That's
cool.
And I would say, from a entertainment and artistic cultural standpoint, Miles Davis is definitely high on the list.
Yes. And
it's ironic in that Miles is on my list, and it's not solely about the music, or it's not solely because I myself, throughout most of my life, did not pursue being a music person up front. It's like my music activity was behind, DJing and marketing and promoting. Miles Davis, I will always say that from a marketing standpoint, I did not take any business courses in school. So the fact that I ended up working on the business side of the music business is something that, again, God. But Miles Davis kept himself relevant for 50 some odd years by with one key thing that's easy to identify that many people miss, and that is that he was not afraid to have younger people around him,
yes,
to let them do what they do and not dictate to them what to do, and grow together, so that he went through changes musically, style-wise, and things like that, because every so often he would have first he starts out hanging with Charlie Parker and them, then he goes to Cannonball and Coltrane, then he goes to Herbie and that crew, and then he goes to Chick, and then he M2 and all of them, all the way up to one of my favorite pieces of Miles Davis music is, people don't realize that near the end, Miles Davis music with Prince, and people some people don't remember that he did a hip hop stuff with Easy Mo Bee, doo-wop soul. So
yeah, man,
it all stems from the fact that he wasn't afraid to change. I recently, Kenny Garrett, saxophone player, came out with some new stuff recently. And I just remember that the last time I saw Miles Davis play live was at a club in Redondo Beach, California. I was living out there, and Kenny Garrett was like something like 18, 19 years old. He was like the young saxophone player that was on that gig, and Miles was just letting him just like blow. And that's key. So Miles Davis definitely there. Stevie Wonder, because of not only his musical genius, but his social consciousness. Gil Scott-Heron.
Yes, indeed.
Sly and the Family Stone. Sly Stone. And Bob Marley are like top of the food chain. For me, it's I view myself. My father was somebody who was very active in the community and very active in civil rights, and I view myself as an activist. And arts, for me, at its foundation, comes with activism, either through your art or
Mm-hmm.
actions that you take because of places that you get into because of where your art or your relationship to your art can take you. So those are key people that are, you know, right there. And Curtis Mayfield
Mm-hmm.
also very key people and very instrumental, and people that I was exposed to often through my older cousin, or you know, or many through my older cousins and you know, things like that.
That's a lot of wisdom. I mean, lots of wisdom, lots of beauty, lots of culture. And I like when you started off, you said, you know, it was more than the music,
Right.
you know, the impact on your life, your journey, and just in everything that you do. I'm sure. Um, you know, going into this, I like to talk about your love and your appreciation for the arts, music and film. You know,
Right.
your music career, with various record labels, as well as stuff you've done on your own. Why don't you take us through that journey?
Well, I mean, you know, as it says in my bio, I
Mm-hmm.
started out um, working. Um, I went to Brooklyn College, the City University of New York, and it's totally by accident. I went in initially as a PE major, and then in the middle of freshman year, changed to where um, I changed to communications,
Mm-hmm.
largely because I wanted to be Frankie Crocker. You know, it's like everybody in New York of a certain age, um, you know, knew Frankie Crocker, used to listen to Frankie Crocker. I could rock a party as a DJ, and I was like, I want to be on the radio. Um, and um, so so I changed to majoring in television and radio at
Mm-hmm.
college. And fortunately, again, it wasn't something that I planned because I didn't go there for that reason. It happened to be the school at the time that had the most prominent um, communications department,
Yes.
certainly in the city at that time, and possibly in the state. It was competing against Syracuse at that time, and ahead of NYU in terms of that at that time, and really good faculty. A lot of very prominent people came out of our radio station that have gone on to do big things in that time period. And I, from that school and from that radio station, WBCR, Brooklyn College Radio, became the first person, the first Black person in the history of the school, of this prominent college radio station, to be in management in programming. Because unlike many college radio stations, most college radio stations, you have your Black hour, your folk hour,
That's right.
your jazz hour, your rock hour, your hard rock hour, your punk rock hour. You know, you have all these hours. Whereas at Brooklyn College, radio at that time, we just had one format.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frank, that format wasn't the format that most Black people wanted to deal with. It was progressive rock, lots of Grateful Dead, lots of Bruce Springsteen, lots of Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, stuff like that. And many Blacks in the school didn't want to do that. Well, my thing was that I have a goal. I want to be Frankie Crocker. And if this is what I got to do to be Frankie Crocker,
Oh Lord, that's
do
funny.
it to the best of my ability. And fortunately, actually, Frankie Crocker actually had a stint that I knew about where he worked on WMCA. So even though most people knew him from WBLS, he
Right.
had started in New York at WWRL, and then he had went from WWRL to WMCA, pop station, and then came back to BLS. So there was a precedent. And you know, I took it, and then by being the music director at the radio station, I met all the record people in town who worked at the record labels.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them told me that a woman named Judy LeBeau was in charge of promoting records to college radio stations for Atlantic Records. And she told me about a job that was opened had opened at A&M Records. And I went for that job, and I got that job. And as they say, the rest is history. So that is where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
And working at a record label, for the most part, that ended my wanting to be Frankie Crocker, but I was dealing with the Frankie Crockers of the world from a different side of things, or the junior Frankie Crockers originally, and then the real Frankie Crocker at one point. And from that point on, I had a short stint being on the air in Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta at one point, in my 20s, and I was on the radio. I was a DJ at WCLK Jazz Radio Station, that licensed to Clark, was then Clark College, now Clark University, Clark Atlanta University, WCLK, and I also was a newscaster at an outlet in Atlanta for a point, but most of my career from there was working in the music business, or for the next several years was working in the music business. Eventually as a manager and managing people like Kashif and Force MDs and Melba Moore, and Freddie Jackson, Najee, Melissa Morgan, people like that. Initially through an entity where I was general manager of Hush Productions, which for most of the 80s was the most prominent Black-owned management firm in the music business. So that was that foundation. And then through that, at Hush Productions, we were prominent. So basically a lot of people would come to us or be brought to us to try to come off, even at different things. We had a relationship with Nelson George, who was then a writer. He was the Black music reporter and writer for an editor for Billboard magazine. Okay. And we had a good relationship with Nelson. So Nelson would introduce us to people like Spike Lee when they were trying to raise money or whatever, trying to get on, or Reginald Hudlin, and James Bond. And through seeing Spike and seeing Reggie do things, and then actually Nemo Barnett, who's one of the most prominent.
I remember that name. Yeah.
Doing great things even to this day. She used to actually operate out of our office at one point before she went to AFI at Hush Productions. And seeing people like that do things made me believe that a Black person like me could produce stuff that could work, that could be viable.
Yes.
Because people don't realize in those days you didn't see that many Black people on television.
No, we didn't.
It was a special occurrence, and you certainly didn't see that many Black people behind the scenes in prominent positions on television. So that seeing those things combined with the ascension of music video gave you where every so often you were doing productions. They were just videos, music videos. But then seeing that and seeing those people succeed made me believe that I can do it. And I haven't been directly involved. I haven't been involved as a producer in a hit to the level of some of those people, but I have done some what I feel is some quality projects that I'm proud of. And there's more to come where that is. And I look at, the music business is I love music.
Yes.
I don't love the music business, but the music business has always been something that it's almost like a day job that you could fall back on. So when my dad, so we had, had At Hush Productions produced a low budget film with director James Bond III, starring Kadeem Hardison and Bill Nunn, who was my homie from when I lived in Atlanta, called
Mhm.
Death. Some people think it's a great cult film. Other people think it's the worst thing they ever saw in their life. And I enjoy people talking about it when they don't know
That's
what to
funny.
do about it. So they give their honest opinions. And some of those, hilarious. But it's like going through that and going through that. What one of the things was my dad came to me right before he passed, and he says, "Are you ever going to produce?" Like, my dad was my movie date many times, like my
Yeah.
movies, and we would go to movies all the time. And he says, "Are you going to produce another movie?" And I said, "Well, Dad, it's hard to find scripts, and good scripts." So that I said, I need to find something that either I feel is going to be a big blockbuster, or if only one person sees it, right, it can change that one person's life.
Right.
That's extreme, but that's exactly what I told my dad about a week before he passed away when he asked me the question.
Mhm.
And what happened is I was living in Los Angeles, and there's a basketball tournament happens in the summertime, right in Bedford-Stuyvesant, in the playground at 305, elementary school 305 in Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, now it's called the Kevin Bushell Preteen Basketball Classic, after the name of the gentleman who was the first president of the organization. And this basketball tournament at the time was approaching its 25th year,
Mhm.
2004. And people like Stephon Marbury, Rayford Skip to My Lou Alston, Jamal Tinsley, the current coach at Oklahoma State University, Michael Boynton Jr., international star Omar Cook, former star at St. John's University, current stars of St. John's University afterwards, Julian Champagny and Justin Champagny, who was a star last year at University of Pittsburgh, two twin brothers from Bishop Loughlin High School in Brooklyn. Javon Pinkston, who starred many years ago at Bishop Loughlin High School and at Villanova University, all played in this basketball league when they were preteens. They were 12, 13 and under. And I decided to do a documentary. I had gotten into Michael Moore and documentaries, and decided to do a documentary on the basketball tournament.
Mhm.
And came back to New York. That's actually what brought me back. I came back originally just to do the film, was going to go back to Los Angeles, and had to be here for several months, and decided to stay. That's what I did, which my cousin Steve Booth and myself produced this documentary. It's played in Belgium, Australia,
Yes.
France,
Amazing.
Canada, various different places in America. It was available on Netflix at one point, Amazon. It was available on Amazon, again, streaming the last few years. And we did that. And then what started happening, we started getting contracted to do documentaries. So now some people are saying, "Oh, you're a documentary filmmaker." Well, I never thought of doing a documentary but it fit the criteria of either it's going to be a big blockbuster, or if only one person sees it, it could change their life. Well, more than one person saw it, but I know for a fact one person where it did change his life. And there was a kid on my block who, at the time when he saw it, like the first people I showed that film to were kids on my block on Hancock Street in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And there was one kid who saw kids that he went to school with playing basketball in the film. And he himself didn't play basketball at that point. And from that point, he's, oh, there's Brett, there's Bryce. I play basketball. And that kid then the next year started playing basketball and got good on the circuit to where he got a scholarship to college a few years later when he graduated college. And the rest is history. So it's like, I can always say that it changed his life.
Right. That's right.
So that was successful in that regard. And then people started calling us to contract us to do other documentaries. So we did a documentary for a gentleman named Oliver Hill for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And Oliver Hill was the second to Thurgood Marshall on Brown versus the Board of Education, and actually had tried a case earlier, ironically, again, talking about small world, how God works. Ironically, 10 years before that, there was a case out of my mother's family's small little town, Gloucester, where a woman got on a bus, the Greyhound bus at Gloucester Courthouse, and went to Baltimore and wouldn't get to the back of the bus. And she had a case, and Oliver Hill was the first on that case that was a precursor to the bus boycott thing. 10 years before, almost 10 years before Rosa Parks, us being called to do the PSAs for the Lung Association.
Man,
from people at us do stuff like that. We did a health documentary for the Lynx, and did a documentary for a festival called the Up South Cultural Festival, which used to happen up in Harlem every year. So we did that. My cousin did a house music documentary called Bang the Party, about this party that used to always happen in New York City. So we started doing that, and then that branched off to where it started doing commercials for people running for public office. So we did commercials for Robert E. Carnegie Jr., who was for the last 7 and change years the city councilman from Brooklyn's 36th district, who actually now is running for Brooklyn borough president. We did commercials for various different political candidates in Brooklyn. And then now getting back into the narrative space, which is where I was in the beginning. So we have Am I Black Enough for You?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a low budget mockumentary, fake documentary that starts from a real situation where comedian A.J. Jamal, who's been a very prominent Black comedian for several decades, has been on Comedy Central and Def Comedy Channel, toured the world, and was one of the last vestiges of In Living Color, the cast of In Living Color. He was told by a white comedian, a white comedic manager, prominent manager, that he would never be successful in Hollywood because of the fact that he doesn't use profanity in his act.
Exactly.
So this manager told him that he would never be successful as a Black comedian in Hollywood. And AJ was originally from Cleveland, so he was a peer of people like Steve Harvey and Arsenio Hall and Drew Carey. And basically this guy is like telling him, like, look, give it up, go back to working at IBM. And AJ obviously didn't, and that's where that is. And when AJ told me the story, we just thought it was like so funny, and we actually start out making a real documentary to dispel stereotypes about Black people. But then we decided to just write it, right? Much of what's written is situations. They're real situations. Some of it are real situations with real people. So we have people like comedian Buddy Lewis took
Mm-hmm.
how he went to Howard University, and he grew up in Gary, Indiana, as a competitive swimmer. He went to Howard University on a swimming scholarship. We have music executive Jackie Reinhardt talking about certain racial things in the music business. But then we have this piece where we transition to try to define what is Blackness and who defines what Blackness is.
That's
Then
pretty deep.
go on looking, we go on a search to find the blackest man in America. And we have this thing, we build this blackest, we build the criteria for what is the blackest man in America. And then we take you on a journey to follow him and then to find him.
You all started this process for Am I Black Enough when?
Oh gosh, we
Was it 2009? I thought I read something.
Yeah, we started originally in like 2009, 2010. It's been a long process.
Man.
Yeah, it's been because the thing is, one of the things that happened, we would, like I said, we started out doing a real documentary about the situation, but I was influenced by Michael Moore. If you look at Michael Moore has some very serious topics.
Yes.
But the documentaries about them are often very funny. You know, like there's the guy in the raincoat.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's Roger and Me.
Yeah.
The guy in the raincoat that goes evicting people. So I mean, the guy's doing like some really serious, depressing work.
Yeah.
But the character is really funny. And then I'd also learned that in documentaries, you have to be good. You have to tell a story, which a lot of people nowadays, everybody thinks they can do a documentary, but they don't realize you still got to tell a story.
That's right.
You still have to make characters. You know, like there's the woman, I think her name is Phyllis LeBlanc or something like that. That's the woman in when the levees broke, from the poet from New Orleans. She is a personality. She's a star.
She is. That's right.
In that documentary. So it wasn't coming out the way that I wanted to. And a friend of mine had actually worked at MTV Films and was involved in the production of Pootie Tang. So she says early on, without even, actually wasn't even, like she wasn't a part of the project, she's like, well, you should just like you would be better off writing a fake documentary than doing a real documentary.
Interesting.
It'll have a bigger marketability, which, and then, so for many years I marinated, how do you do this? 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 And then finally it clicked what to do. And then we did it, that was how to do it.
Man, that's, I want to go deeper into that if you don't mind, because I want to share some of this. You're speaking of music, films, and documentaries, and you mentioned about the basketball, and then there's some other stuff that I want to share with the audience. But let's start with the basketball. I think it's 25 Strong, right?
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I'm going to share that clip. I grabbed a quick little clip, and then you can discuss this briefly afterwards. Let me share that clip.
Yeah, I'm feeling this right here, G. Cut me up a little bit, yo. Yeah. I tried it all.
Yeah. If you don't want it, nobody can make you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling this right here, G. Cut me up a little bit, yo. Yeah. I tried it all.
So that's 25 Strong. Tell us, I know you mentioned it earlier, but describe that quick little clip I just shared.
Okay, so 25 Strong was a documentary shot about shot in 2004, released in 2005, about telling the story of the Kevin Bushell preteen basketball classic, which is operated in the playground of 305 Elementary School in Bedford-Stuyvesant since 1980. Since the summer of 1980, consecutive years, with the exception of last year. The only thing that could ever stop it was the pandemic. And it's operated through the love of the community. It's gotten no major support from Nike or Adidas or anything like many of the basketball tournaments you see have corporate sponsorship. It's, it doesn't have major backing from local politicians financially. It's people from the community put up their money. People from the community come out to support it. And we now have a situation where some of the coaches are people that played, many years ago.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure that pretty soon we're going to have some grandkid that's going to come and be a coach sometime in the next couple of years. And it's a beautiful thing. And like I said to you, off screen, that we're going to have this weekend starts it's the 41st year since it started, but it's the 40th year because, again, it lost last year.
Man. So this weekend, for the record, this is today is June the 17th. So that's this weekend coming.
Right.
So that's interesting, because I pull up some stuff that I pulled up on you and some stuff you produced, the documentaries, and I'm like, man, this is some interesting, Kevin has been busy, and I'm sure I haven't uncovered everything. But I also want to share something else. I fell in love with this song, and this brother, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to play it and I'm going to let you talk about it. But I literally played it over and over again.
Okay.
Good morning, America. I got the news today. I'll be deploying. I'll be leaving come Monday. Good morning, America. I got the news today. I don't know when I'm coming home, but I'll write you from out there, 'cause it ain't right to fight for a cause that ain't ours, and it ain't fair for you to fight out there when this country's in despair. It ain't right to fight for a cause that ain't ours, and it ain't fair for you to fight out there. Good morning, America. Did you read the news today?
You made your cameo in that one, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, not who's that the brother playing, and talk about that piece as well.
Okay. So Heston is a wonderful singer-songwriter that is prominent on the new soul scene.
Mm-hmm.
He at that time was living in Atlanta. I believe that at one point he moved to Philly. That's several years ago that we did that. And he had written this song, Good Morning America, that just hit me. It hit me. Like I said earlier, I'm arts and activism, and it just hit me early. It just hit me, and his publicist at the time, when I first heard this song, was a friend of mine, and I would tell her, like, it's 1968. It's 1968, because you have these things again. You may be young, but they still influence you.
That's right.
So the whole Chicago 7 and all the happenings at the 1968 Democratic Convention were things that were very vivid and always been very vivid in my mind. So I was like, the conditions are such where it's gonna come back to, there's gonna be protests like this at the conventions and stuff like that. And people are going to start to be active and be out in the streets again. Now, in that regard, I might have been 10 years too early, because last summer people were out in the streets,
Yeah.
and were active and so on and so forth. But that song, literally, I wanted to do that song so bad, and I saw it. They had went a couple of years without doing anything with it, to where I literally like called them up and was like, look, it's like, if he gives me $250 to just cover a couple of people I need to work with me on doing this,
Yes.
I'll do this for him for nothing. Like, I believe in it that much.
That's serious.
Essentially what happened. And it was around the time of the whole Occupy Wall Street thing in Security Park downtown, not far from where you used to work at American Love.
Yeah.
And literally you see some of the shots actually happen in the middle of the protest. Like, I'm a big fan of cinema, the technique called cinema verite, where you shoot things and they may be fictitious, but they're shot like they're real, and actually literally going inside of real situations and shooting with real stuff going on around it. So that's something I'm very much into.
Man, I love it. I love that. I wanna share one more.
Okay.
But before I share, am I Black enough for you? I want to show some pictures
Okay.
on that. I know you mentioned AJ Jamal. This was on set when you were setting up.
Yeah, this is when we're shooting him. Yeah, that's in Vegas. Yeah.
And then this was some newspaper coverage.
This is a newspaper we made for the film.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That is the actor E. George Perry.
Yes.
People would know as the model that Nia Long is shooting that famous studio shoot in Love Jones. That is, he plays the character Jomo Johnson, who is the Black college professor who becomes the blackest man in America.
Now that's interesting. Then there's this one.
That's him in another outfit.
That's him in another outfit.
The
Right.
whole thing is, he does these videos, but it's almost like one of the beliefs of the character is that back in the day, a lot of the so-called Black Power activists and the Black cultural nationalist type people were not well-rounded in terms of, like, either you were very strong culturally, or but you weren't. Let's say, like, it wouldn't be prevalent for, let's say, somebody who was like a djembe player, with an entity like the Last Poets, to be hanging out with some guy from Wall Street.
Right.
Part of the premise of this, and what makes the guy dangerous, is that he believes that we need everybody to be involved in the Black Power thing. Every aspect, every type of Black person, so that the suits need to be with the creative people. The Muslims need to be with the Christians, and and on and so forth. So it's exhibited in a Forrest Gumpian way, where he does these videos, but each time he does a video, he's dressed differently. So that's a shot of him in pure authentic Nigerian garb. Yeah.
And so this is a short clip of the trailer itself. Right. And I'm going to share that.
Question is, am I Black enough for you?
Maybe we got a crack actor in their family. Or only me, huh?
Roy Gerber tells me, I'm so sorry, my friend. You're a clean comedian, you're funny, but you cannot make it in Hollywood because you're a Black comedian and you're too clean. He said, you too clean to be successful in Hollywood.
What is Blackness and who defines it?
The definition of what it means to be a Black American that has been blurry since the beginning of the Republic.
I remember when I was really young, I was hanging out in I think it was Red Hook with some friends, and I went over to someone else's house. And these little kids were like, "Cracker, cracker," pointing at me, "Cracker." And I didn't know that.
So you had some, where can everyone find that? And you said it's on Netflix?
No,
that
that piece is on, you can pick it up on Vimeo on demand.
Okay.
On Vimeo on demand. And also, it's actually, it's going to be on Tubi sometime within the next couple of weeks.
So is that for the basketball one as well?
The
your work
was on Netflix in the past. The basketball movie is out many years ago, so it was on Netflix and it was on Amazon recently. But you can actually see the whole basketball movie on YouTube now because it's been out over 10 years, so we just finally just put it up on YouTube.
And it's called, what's the full title again?
The basketball movie is called 25 Strong. A film about basketball, a film about life.
So it can be found on Netflix.
No, it's not. Well, it's taken off. It's run its course on Netflix, so it's off of Netflix. But you can find that on the basketball movie. You can find on YouTube.
On YouTube, okay.
Right. Yeah, that came out in 2005.
So 25 Strong, as well as Am I Black Enough?
Right. Am I Black Enough for You is on Vimeo.com on demand, and will be on Tubi within the next couple of weeks.
Perfect, man. I'm gonna put that up there later on. So let's moving on, man. I'm just like, I want to ask you 1,000 more questions, but I know I don't have 1,000 more hours, so I'll just go to this part. What would you say is Kevin's style, your differentiator?
Okay. So the thing for me is I like things that are not cookie cutter. But I don't want to be so abstract to where it's not attainable or people don't want to watch it. So I reside somewhere to the left, like edgy to the left. Like if I was a football kicker, I would kick the ball. It would be inside the uprights, but it would be right to the left upright, barely making it inside and having some sort of edginess. And I'm not afraid to have the edginess. And I also am, aligned with projects that are that are not safe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that allowed me, in my career to have been aligned with people like Chris Rock and Martin Lawrence early in their careers.
Yes.
Another project that we have out now that I'm involved with as a executive producer is the Little Duval comedy special. And Little Duval is certainly edgy. And as a comedy special, living my best life that you could see right now on your cable and your satellite dish on demand, or you can also see it digitally on Vimeo on demand, and it will be on All Black streaming outlet in August. He's certainly edgy. And then also I'm involved with a film called The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain that's about a real life situation where a 68-year-old man, former Army veteran, former Marine, former correction officer with a bipolar issue, got killed in November of 2011 by White Plains police when his life alert system went off at 5:20 in the morning. And they came out, he didn't respond because he was asleep. And the police came out to his house, demanded that he let them in. He's like, "I'm good, I don't need you to come in." They insisted on coming in. He's like, "I'm good, I don't need you to come in here, I'm fine." They barged down his door, tased him, and then shot him and killed him. That case was initially the DA up Westchester County DA initially would not charge the policeman who shot him. Just the other day, last Thursday, a week ago, the current DA announced that she's going to look back into that case and another case. So a gentleman by the name of David Medell has done a wonderful film about that, starring Frankie Faison. And Frankie Faison gives the performance of his life. And that film is going to be out in theaters and on demand. It's September 17th of this year. And that also fills that, making strong statements that are edgy and figuring out a way and not being safe, that make strong statements. That's what I'm attracted to.
It's a lot to be attracted to. That's amazing. There's so many different sides to you, Kevin, so many different dynamics. The creative juices are constantly, I can tell there's constantly coming. I started asking, I didn't start asking. For the last few interviews, I decided to let my guests ask themselves a question that I didn't ask, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, what question would you like to ask yourself that I haven't asked you, or something that no one else has asked you, or that you would like us to know?
Wow. That's a good question. I think that actually my answer I've already said in the question that my father asked me about before he died, about, are you going to do another film?
Mm-hmm.
I would flip it. Actually, you know what? I'll go back.
Yes.
Go back in time, and rather than come up with something that nobody's ever asked me, I'll go back and tell a story of somebody who asked me a question and what my answer was to that person as a 19-year-old. Because I think that my answer to that person as a 19-year-old is exactly what I'm doing right now as a 63-year-old, and much of what I've done over the last many years. When I was in college, my favorite teacher, my favorite professor in college was a woman by the name of Kamako Baraka. Kamako Baraka, AKA, previously known as Sandra Jones, was the sister of Amiri Baraka, previously known as Leroy Jones.
Man.
And the aunt of Ras Baraka, mayor of my residential city of Newark, New Jersey. And I had her for an African-American literature course at Brooklyn College. And at one point, I'll never forget this, at one point in the class, in the term, she asked us, what do we see ourselves doing? And I said to her, I don't even know how I even came to this. It's amazing that I said this, thinking about it, because it was so far-fetched then. I said to her, I want to produce television shows and movies, but I don't want to do them in the status quo way of how the system presides over the same currently. And that's at a time when, again, as I said earlier, I almost didn't really believe that Black people at that time could really produce TV shows, or certainly a Black person like me could produce TV shows and things of that nature. And there was only 3 television networks, no streaming, no internet.
That's right.
Really no cable as we know it now. At that particular point, HBO was just kind of coming on the scene in some form fashion. But one thing I think that might have produced it, my major in school was film, television, radio, but I took a concentration that studied alternative. It's like many of my courses, or several of my courses, were about what the possibilities with the technology was. So I spent several courses studying what the technology could do, but wasn't doing it at that particular time. And it's actually interesting to me to see how some of it has shaken out, but it didn't quite shake out the way that they thought it was going to shake out, but it's still shaking out because there was this thought that it was going to democratize things, and the money wasn't going to be important, and you could just do whatever you wanted to do. That hasn't really happened. But what has happened is that you have more options of how you can move. And fortunately, and technology has changed to where you can get things done cheaper. A movie that would have cost $1 million to do 15 years ago, you can actually really do for $100,000 or less today.
Yeah.
Many people sit around, they complain about not seeing enough of us there. My thing is, use what we have rather than worry about what we don't have. Use what we have.
That's right.
Stories you want to tell. So we make a film like Am I Black Enough for You for $25,000. It still gets on places like Tubi and other places. And I'm fortunate to have a person like AJ Jamal, like a John Lasseter, like Buddy Lewis, who are prominent people in the comedic space, but they're friends of mine. So they'll do it for me for next, they're not doing it for nothing, but they're doing it next.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
So that's the thing. That's the answer. That's the question. How will you do, or how is it, and why is it that you do what you do? And that's the question and the answer. And it was something that Kamako Baraka had asked, I'd given her the answer to many, many, many years ago.
And that's beautiful. I mean, that pretty much defines you. I mean, when I first met you, I picked that up from you. You have that something special that connects with our humanity.
Thank you.
It's much bigger than, you really connect the dots, and your appreciation for music, history, culture, the arts, you constantly, you don't just preach that, on social media, but off social media.
Yeah.
And I think that's a blessing, and for our youth, not just our youth, for us adults as well.
I mean,
culture.
It's like, and again, I spoke about earlier that I was in Brooklyn. I was in the right place by accident, at Brooklyn College, and I didn't really appreciate it a lot. I appreciate part of it. Like, I appreciated the radio career, record business career, ascension part of it. But now I appreciate more of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I look at something, I look at somebody, I look at a couple of things, or two things. One thing actually happened very recently, in that Jimmy Smits just got a Hollywood star last week in Hollywood. And Jimmy Smits is not somebody that I've ever been tight with, but Jimmy Smits, we went in classes together. We went speech class together in college. He was, a couple of years older than me, but we went in classes, and he was so much better than the rest of us. So I was like, oh, that was actually part of the reason why I didn't believe that I could actually get it done, because he was just so much better than us. But to actually know that you went to school with someone, you were in a class, that you acted with someone who has gone on to have a career where he has a star in Hollywood. And I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for 10 plus years. So I know what that means.
Yes.
He's essentially in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
This guy that I knew walking through the student union building, when one of the styles of time was to wear army fatigue jackets that you would say lines to in the class. to know that I worked at a college radio station with a David Martin or Scott Herman, who went on to be executive VP at CNN, the creator of When They Said the Show, Showbiz Tonight, or Scott was the executive vice president of CBS Viacom's radio group, which means he's one of the 3 most important people. You know, so you're at this place, and another thing it does, it makes you realize that there is a God, because I would have never been at Brooklyn College. It would have been the last place that I would have been at, but if by choice. But a certain group of circumstances placed me at Brooklyn College. And then by being at Brooklyn College in that time period, I had exposure to people that really did one of the key things with the college faculty is having professors who actually did what they're teaching, as opposed to just theory. So we had professors who actually worked producing network television. We had an English professor who actually won the Pulitzer Prize. John Ashbery won the Pulitzer Prize for English, for poetry, excuse me, while I was there, right? You know, at a school that costs next to nothing to be there. Like, we're not talking about being at Princeton or Harvard, right? You expect that at Princeton or Harvard. You don't expect that at a city university.
Man.
You know?
Right.
You know, that's where it is. You know, it's like, you know, the thing is, we were talking off screen, the thing that folks have to realize is that you have to be successful in the entertainment arts industry, you have to put in a lot of work. You have to put in a lot of time. You have to put in a lot of studying the craft, studying the terrain, studying what's around you, noticing the change, because technology changes very fast. But it's almost like there are two things that it's like. If you see an iceberg and you're in the water and you see an iceberg, well, know that the part of the iceberg that's over the water is smaller than the part of the iceberg that's under the water. The part of the iceberg that's under the water is the foundation. And if you look at them building a big, like not that far from me in South Orange, New Jersey right now, there's a whole block that they've torn down. And they're obviously building high-rise buildings in this place where this block was. Well, the first thing that they did was dig down. Okay, so they're just getting to the point months later where they're almost getting ready to start coming up above the ground. They spent almost a year digging underground.
That's right.
And that's the foundation. So similarly, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a horse player, you're a DJ, you're a writer, you're a talk show host, you're whatever you are, you're a dancer. You have to put in a lot of work to put in a foundation. Sometimes you may get lucky, but you won't last if you don't have that foundation.
Amen to that.
And that's I would leave people with that.
Well, you know, that was my question to end with. What advice would you give?
That's it.
You know, and you just gave it. I mean, that's some meaningful advice to young people, old people, everybody. You know, you got to put in the work, and you have to have a solid foundation, you know. And even for some who don't think they have that foundation, there is a village. You know, you can create your foundation. You got to put in the work. You know, it's interesting. I started. Okay, so Am I Black Enough For You
is actually, we have different entities. And Am I Black Enough For You is actually produced by an entity we have called Indie Streets Filmworks.
Right. Okay.
And the foundation of Indie Streets Filmworks was actually almost like a mentorship. It was to do micro budget films and projects, which we usually get on Amazon. And it was the foundation of that. The first 2 projects was a film called Love Don't Last Forever. And then there was a web series called Best Frenemies. And it was to educate and to show some young mentees that I have straight out of the Louis Armstrong projects in Brooklyn, how they could monetize being in the game, and hopefully to have them grow to where they can make a living in this world. And that's I tell them all the time, the key to success, like I'm trying to help you to the best of my ability, but the key to success is to find somebody that is closer to your own age. Because there's things that you're going to say to me, I don't care who you are. There's a rebellion thing when you go to different age groups. So you find somebody close to your own age who you won't have that rebellion thing. They may not know as much as I know, but for what needs to be translated to that person, it'll be easy to transmit it because they won't just this guy, you're just another old guy saying it.
Right.
But you find somebody closer to your age who is as good or better than you at doing the same things you aspire to do. Hang with that person and then ask them a lot of questions.
Yes.
And that's the key to success.
That's a great.
There is nothing that would have happened for me if I had been like a lot of the other Black kids at Brooklyn College of that time and not want to put in the time at Brooklyn College Radio. Nothing that I've done professionally would have happened.
That's some excellent advice, Kevin. Especially the ages. You got 20-year-olds, you got 30-year-olds, you got 50-year-olds, 70-year-olds. And sometimes when you're trying to give advice to a 20 or 25-year-old, you're like, you're too old, you don't know. And, a lot of times us older folks have a habit of saying, we didn't do that back in our days. This is some crazy music. But, there is an appreciation, where you learn to connect the dots. But your advice about finding someone in your peer group is some excellent advice, but someone who's doing it and learning it and setting that foundation, because it's not going to happen overnight. That's in anything you do. Me running my business, I get headaches every day, every day, but it's okay because it's my headaches that I created. And it's a beautiful thing knowing that everything starts to come to light. Eventually, it all starts working together for the greater good. So, yeah, this has been an excellent interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I don't even know why I'm calling it an interview. It's been a great conversation. This is not an interview because sometimes these conversations can go for an hour, 45 minutes, and 2 hours, and I think you and I have been going about an hour and 29 minutes, but that's okay. That's okay. I sincerely thank you for being passionately purposeful in all that you do for the community, for the industry. Thank you for your contributions, your hard work, your beautiful spirit. I appreciate you immensely. I really, really do.
Thank you. And we will be talking soon. All right?
Yes, we will. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, this segment will be available on the Anything and Everything Media YouTube channel, as well as on all major podcast platforms. To learn more about Anything and Everything Media and to find out what's coming up on Kevin Harewood's schedule in the future, any future projects, visit our website at www.anythingandeverythingmedia.com. Until then, keep it moving.
Thanks a lot.